My name is David Bishop, and I started work here at West Point Pepperell in 1974. I spent 4 years in the Navy before I came to work here. When I first started, I was down in the Vellux operation. I worked there for about a year, and Jim Marcotte, he was one of the supervisors. He was starting up a new division, a new department, because they were having problems making the Vellux blanket. They had problems with the flock that they were using, so they wanted to make their own flock here. So Jim Marcotte was working with Phil Gauthier and a man from down Georgia that was the head of the research or the R&D down there, and they were developing a way to make flock here. So he asked if I would be interested once they got set up to go work over there. So it sounded interesting to me, so I went there, and I started out, I was a cutter operator. The flock, it's a nylon flock. It's the fuzzy stuff that's on the blanket, and it has to be cut at a very, very short length, and it has to be all uniform, the same length. So they started buying nylon from DuPont, and they would bring it in, and there were chemicals that were on the nylon tow, and the tow was about a 300-pound box of nylon tow, and there were strands in it, thousands of them, and they'd feed them through a scouring range where we would wash off the chemicals that were on it and put on other chemicals, and then they would bring it to the cutting machine, and they would feed into that and would cut it to the length they needed. And then they would bring it over to a kettle, which was about a 300-gallon kettle, and they would wash it again and treat it with other chemicals, soda ash and a soap, and then they would drop it down to the floor below into an extractor, which was like a giant washing machine that you see in like large industrial laundromat or laundries, and would spin most of the water out of it, and then they would blow it up to the dryer where they would break up the flock and dry it, and they would bag it, and then they would send it over to the ranges where they make the blankets. I worked as the cutter for about a year, maybe 2 years, and they made me a fixer where I repaired the machines in the department. And it was quite a process. I worked there for 35 years till they closed down the mill and it went to China. And I was only 60, so I wasn't quite ready to retire. And I had a friend that works at the University of New England, or his wife does, and they got me in and got me a job there. So my final 5 years before I retired, I worked there, and I'm retired now. Now I'm working at the mill again as a volunteer. They were trying to set up a museum, and we're having big help from the Maine Historic Society. They've been great. They're setting up an exhibit area for us now, and once that gets going, we hope to see a lot more people getting involved and volunteering to help out and do different things. So it's been very interesting, and it's been quite a project. We're just a small group, but we're doing what we can. I grew up down Old Orchard, I went to school there. I graduated, and Old Orchard was a great place to grow up, especially in the 50s. It was a completely different town back then. It was a very small community, so everyone pretty much knew everyone else. Old Orchard is the smallest town in the state of Maine, area-wise. Like population, well, it's relatively small in the winter, and then in the summer it really gets bigger. We used to have a saltwater swimming pool down in Ocean Park, and that's where I learned to swim. It was the tide would come in, and they'd open the gates, fill up the pool, then they'd close it, and they might open it again to change the water every now and then with the tide. So it was really an exciting place to live. I enjoyed it. It was always a lot to do. You live within walking distance of the beach, so you could go to the beach every day if you wanted. And of course, being young, we always wanted to go to the beach. There was always something going on there. The pier was always a big draw. But there was a lot of opportunity working at the mill. You could work, generally get overtime and make more money. We were a union shop, so they had to follow certain rules, and of course we had to also. We might have been protected by the union, but they also worked with the company. It wasn't just one-sided. It wasn't to give us a better living and all. It was also to help the company out. We did go on strike one summer. 13 weeks we were on strike, and when we came back, it was pretty much the same contract they offered on the first day, so it wasn't a good time for either the workers or the company. And later on, like with the union, we only worked 40 hours a week, and if we worked Saturdays, you get time and a half. If you work Sundays, you get double time. And we'd get a lot of orders, so we would have to work. And we were obligated, if they posted Saturdays, we had to come in. And it got to a point where we had so many orders, the union agreed where the company could enforce Sunday work, like twice a month. So you would have to come in, you get double time. It was great money-wise, but when you're young, you don't really enjoy putting in your whole life behind these four walls. So it was a little rough to take at times. Well, we did have a bowling league, and I was on that. We'd bowl once a week, and the company had various activities that they would put on. They had a employee appreciation day. And it was kind of funny because it started out like the first year or two, we'd have a cookout in the parking lot, and they cooked up steaks, and it was really great. And then as the years go by, it started dropping down to like chicken and then hamburger. And we kept expecting it to be they'd feed us out of the vending machine at the end. And they had Christmas parties too. Like every year they would allow us to take the afternoon off, and each department would have their own Christmas party. And the company had a larger Christmas party and events outside the mill. I didn't participate in those. I was single, so I wasn't really interested in like going to those, but the ones at the mill were quite enjoyable. 2009 is when the mill closed, and approximately 5 years before that, like, we were sold, and at the time we were sold, we had to, everyone had to sign a paper saying we were quitting working for West Point, and the next day they hired us. And the way I heard it, the reason they did that was they thought at the time they would, when they closed in 5 years' time, they would only have to pay us a severance pay for 5 years. But there was a state representative from Biddeford, yes, it was a Mr. Farley in the 70s, and he put a bill through in Augusta that if a company closed and moved out of state, they would have to pay their workers a 1 week pay for every year they worked. And they had to follow through with that. And so that greatly helped. I personally got 35 weeks pay, and with the unemployment and all, it certainly helped. And the state helped us quite a bit when it closed. They had training. You could go into computer sciences or whatever. And I figured, like, I was 60 at the time, and I didn't really take advantage of that. I got a job almost right off at a university in New England. So, but I know a lot of people that did take advantage of it, and they took schooling for a year, and while they were doing their schooling, they also could collect unemployment. So it really helped them out a lot, and a lot of them did get jobs, although I do know a few that even now they're still, like, looking for a job. I'd like to think there's a possibility, but there's so little manufacturing jobs anymore. It's almost like everyone's in the service industry is about the only jobs that are available. But you do see more coming back. Like, even here, Doug Sanford, he bought the mill complex after they closed, and he has over 100 businesses in here now. And there is a textile, there's a company, I think it's Angel Rocks, they make clothing. So it has sort of come around, and there are still textile industries, just not like it was way back.